We're probably good.
All right, I will call the meeting to order, January 10th, 2018, Port Edward School Board meeting. Roll call, please.
Kathy McGrath. Here. Leo Tomskar.
Here.
John Donovan.
Here.
Tracy Lyons present. And
Yeah.
Carrie McBride.
Kerry said he might be running a little late, so he should be here soon. So, first item, consider approval of agenda.
So moved. Second it.
The motion and the second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Item 2, report from student representatives and student and staff recognition.
I have brought you a awesome crew of student council students, and I will let them do all of their introductions and things like they normally do, but impressive group over here today. So.
Okay, I'm Taylor Foe, and I'm a junior. I'm in basketball, volleyball, student council, ecology club, drama club, FBLA, law enforcement, and National Honor Society. And I plan to attend UW lacrosse to become a PA. Drama club is having a lock-in on the 13th, and boys and girls in athletics will also, they have been selling raffle tickets, and at halftime of the boys game on Friday, January 19th, the winners will be picked. The boys basketball record is 10 wins and 2 losses, and the girls record is 9 wins and 4 losses.
Okay, I'm Caitlin Lip, and I'm a junior, and I'm involved in basketball, volleyball, softball, student council, drama, law enforcement, FBLA, National Honor Society, and I plan on attending college. I don't really know what one yet, and a psychology major. And before winter break, we attended the movie theaters for our annual movie day and saw the movies Pitch Perfect 3 and Jumanji, and everything went well and everyone enjoyed their movies.
I'm Cassie Oshasky. I'm a senior. I am in basketball, softball, volleyball. I'm in the student council, Skills USA, lots of other clubs. And and I'm going to UW lacrosse for microbiology. And the seniors are putting on a Valentine's Day winter semi-formal on February 17th from 7 to 11.
My name is Carson Parks. I'm a freshman. I'm in cross-country, basketball, student council, drama, forensics, and hopefully golf. I don't really know what I want to do yet in the future. And student council handed out ornaments. They were given to the staff and local homeowners as a thank you for the chaos throughout the day while school is going on.
Any questions?
You're all busy.
Thank you so much for keeping us advised.
Oh, the current issues class, since we just recently came and talked to you guys. We just, today and tomorrow, today we went to the Alexander Foundation and we looked at pictures of Mr. Bueller and we scanned some of those because he has a whole bunch of them, and we're going back again tomorrow because we only got like 50 of them and there's so many more to go through. And we also, some of the students and Mr. Miller went to Signs a few days ago to talk about the wall. So we've got that going in motion, so everything's going really well.
Excellent. Thank you.
You can pass the word along to the folks in Mr. Miller's class that if some of the other students would be interested in hearing Mr. Bueller's presentation, they're going to have a chance. So you'll see a poster up in school, and Mr. Miller will have details for that for you later.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Great. All right, next item is President's Reports. Board member attendance. I said Carrie will hopefully arrive shortly. And next item is reading of DPI Proclamation in recognition of Adult School Crossing Guard Recognition Week. A proclamation, whereas Wisconsin Adult School Crossing Guards provide an invaluable service in helping to ensure the safe passage of our youngest, most vulnerable pedestrians, children walking between home and school, and whereas adult school crossing guards typically serve with a dedication that discounts the rigors of harsh weather, split shifts, and heavy traffic, and whereas for more than 5 decades, adult school crossing guards have served communities across Wisconsin, and that service has helped to drive down the rates of young pedestrian deaths and injuries, despite increases in traffic volume. And whereas adult school crossing guards add to the effectiveness of the student safety patrol members with whom they often serve and whose activity they help direct. And whereas adult school crossing guards help reinforce in the minds of the young people they assist the importance of traffic hazard identification and safe street crossing behavior, therefore be it resolved that January 22nd through the 26th, 2018 be declared Adult School Crossing Guard Recognition Week in the state of Wisconsin. Signed by State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Evers. Hope you convey our thanks for all our adult crossing guards.
And we do usually go meet them at some point during the week with the police department as well, and give them some recognition and make sure they have something warm to drink, a cup of coffee, hot chocolate, something.
I know they do an awesome
Yep.
job for us.
Yep.
And that's Kelly Hildebrandt and Debbie Dix, those
Yeah.
are the two.
Yep.
Okay. And our next board meeting will be on Wednesday, February 14th, 2018.
I will not be here for that week.
All right. Move on to administrative reports. First one, Kyle.
Just briefly on our class registration process, now is the time to start registering for high school classes. And our students, our 8th and 9th grade students received a set of presentations from staff members, as well as our 10th and 11th grade students as in a separate presentation on the various electives, prerequisites, all of those good things that they need to know. There are still a few bugs in the system in terms of how the state of Wisconsin is going to treat the early college credit program. So we don't have all the final details on that, and that's replacing youth options. There will be a policy piece that will end up before the board on rescinding youth options and rescinding another program called course options, replacing some of that with what's called part-time open enrollment and this early college credit piece. So those are the only things that are even a bit holding us back in terms of registration with the kids in terms of exactly how those programs will work. They'll still be there. We've had kids participate in the past in the youth options, which is very similar to that, and course options. So kids will still be able to. We just don't have all the final details. We're going to be starting the scheduling process as well in the high school. You know, one of the interesting pieces, and I'll talk a little bit about it in open enrollment. You know, the high school enrollment this year is sitting today, I think it's 116. We were at 99 last year. You know, rolling our enrollments forward in just a few years, we're going to be sitting at 140 in the high school. We're already going to start seeing this next year some of the effects of the bigger classes starting to come back into the high school. So we're going to probably be having to look at some different ways to schedule and make sure our kids get the credits they need. Again, look at making sure we have the staffing in the right places and get creative with some of that, because that does make a difference. You know, right now, projecting next year for enrollment, our senior class will be our smallest class at 21 students, but we've got classes of 40 in the works right now, and classes in the mid-30s. So that's quite a big difference in how we schedule. So, and it makes a big difference at the middle school as well, and how the middle school is going to be scheduling. Middle school right now has 132 students sitting in their seats. Next year, I would say we're going to be 140, right near that number. And again, it may seem 8 might not seem like a big number, but when you talk about whether or not you're splitting a section, 8 can be a lot. So that's good for scheduling and registration. It's going to make it fun this year.
What did you say the current high school enrollment is?
116. We were at 99 last year. That's kids sitting in the seats.
Right. Projecting next year?
Next year, the high school will be still around that same number, to be 110s, I would suspect.
Okay.
Could be 108, could be 115, give or take, but
It'll be a couple of years down the road before the high school bumps.
it's, once that senior class of 21 for next year leaves, it'll start bumping up then, and it'll be a very consistent bump up over the course of 4 or 5 years. So, topping out at the moment, 140-ish, so. And we haven't seen numbers like that in 6 or 7 years now. So that'll be quite a big difference. So we're in that process. We're obviously going to be talking staffing and those things as we go through that process, and where we've got people and where we might need to fill in and do some things differently. So one other piece that I wanted to just briefly touch on, and I think, as school board members, I sent you an article with this information in it, but I will pass this out to you. I always like to, especially as we, talk with our community members, make sure that they're fully aware of what's going on in the community in terms of the tax situation. So there's two sides to this. The side with 3 charts is the tax piece. And I'll just briefly mention, this shows 3 different years worth of our taxes in the district, and what parts of our district are paying what portions of the taxes. This last year, our total tax levy was $2,073,861. And as you look at these charts, this past year, the village paid 48% of that total tax, followed by the town of Cranmore at 20%, the town of Seneca at 12%, and so on down the line. Town of Saratoga at 9%, almost 10%. The one thing to notice, if you go down to the bottom chart, the 15-16 tax levy, the village of Port Edwards was paying 53%, and this year it's 48%. So there's certainly some changes going on in what parts of our district are paying what portion. The other piece is, as the town of Saratoga has developed, or what was part of the village of Port Edwards, been detached now for a few years as part of the village, but should be coming back into the village in a few years. It's still part of the school district, but that town of Saratoga has certainly picked up a larger portion. Total dollar amounts, you can see it's in the hundreds of, town of Saratoga at 9%, pays $205,000 toward our total tax. The village is still just over $1 million. So, just to give you that piece of information as to where the tax money is specifically coming from. The back side of it is there's one chart that lists the past several years, past 7 years, and then our revenue limit. So this is the money we receive in state aid, or not categorical, equalized aid, and our taxes. It's not our total, don't look at that and go, that's our total budget number, because there's federal money in on that, and there's other specific categorical aids that are part of that number. But this is what we get in what's called equalized aid and in our tax revenue. This is our revenue limit according to the state on those 2 categories. If you look, the second column is previous 3-year average enrollment. So each year our funding is based on our average enrollment of the previous 3 years. Then you'll see a column says Dpi Calculated Enrollment. So that's what the Dpi is saying in a particular year on the 3rd Friday in September. This is what our enrollment is. And then you can see what I call our actual students in seats. And quite a big difference. This year, on the 3rd Friday, we had 408 students in our building receiving an education. Yet, according to the Dpi Calculated Enrollment, it was 391. And we are being funded as if we had 380. So, the big reason for that DPI number has to do with open enrollment, 6603s, and how those are accounted for in our enrollment. You'll hear a little bit from our auditor on open enrollment and what that means for us. But if we were equal in and equal out of open enrollment, that would be one thing. But now, as we are to the positive of open enrollment, we don't actually get to count those kids in our total enrollment that gets reported to the state. So, you just use a simple number. If we have 400 students in our district, 100 of them are open enrolled, and we send out 100 students, it just looks like we have 400 students. But if we have 401 students in the district, and 101 of them are open enrolled in, and 100 are open enrolled out, we don't get full funding on the one student. We don't get to count that one student in our enrollment for our funding formula. We do get some. We get a transfer of aid from different districts to account for that, but it is, this year it'll be about $7,055.
What percentage is that of the?
It's about 2/3 of what of a resident student would be. It's about 2/3. A resident student for us is worth about $10,800 for our revenue limit numbers. So it's about 2/3. So just keep that in mind as we look at open enrollment. Positive open enrollment is certainly a good place, but it can have an effect on our ability to fully fund staffing positions and things as we've gained more students. The other piece to look at that is what our today current enrollment is of students actually sitting in our seats, 426. So since the third Friday count in September, we're up 18 students. Yep. So, and some of those are residents. Our actual open enrollment disparity declined a little bit because we've gained some residents. We've lost some open enrollment, gained some open enrollment, gained some residents, but we're still definitely in the positive territory. I think at one point it was 26 students. I want to say it's 23 or 24 students more in open enrollment in than out at the moment. You know, it's hard to sometimes talk about those numbers because literally I can look at it today and it can change tomorrow. So, but this gives you kind of that picture. So with that, I'll conclude my report. I just wanted to give you that information.
Thank you. We'll move on to update on 4K. Principal Christie.
Since we approved the 4K position at the last board meeting, we are moving ahead. There've been a couple applicants shifts in kind of how we may be doing things, but by tomorrow we should have hopefully everything set in place as far as our new 4K teacher and our new first grade teacher and how that may work. So there's just been a lot of changes at semester like that. We want to just make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. So the parents are aware of it, kids are aware of it, and
there's some moving parts here yet.
yes, there's some moving parts. That's exactly the word I was looking for. Thank you. But it's going to work out just fine. It's just we've got to get all those pieces into place, and I want that done by semester so that we can start fresh at the new semester. So I think we'll be there. I know we'll be there. So.
We're not to the point where we're doing hiring.
Not
on the agenda tonight for
That's
that.
Correct. That's why I said that's why we have to wait
Yeah.
till tomorrow
Do we
probably.
need a special meeting for that?
I don't know, so we will let you know. We've literally, there's just, as we've made, as we've talked to candidates and working with the candidates, we will, if we do need a special session for a hire, we will certainly do that. Yeah, and that's been in the back of my mind that we may need to do that, so.
I mean, it might be problematic to wait until the 14th of February if we're
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
getting
no,
a person
it-
on board.
put them into place.
Yeah, we can, yeah, and we've done that where
Yeah.
yeah, we can get somebody at least moving along in a position, so, but I think we're gonna definitely have more, as Kara said, tomorrow we should hopefully have a lot more direction that we can take on it, so. Just the timing of it just didn't work for this board meeting in the end.
Christmas break got in the way.
Yeah.
But-
All right. That's it for your,
Yeah.
okay. Next item on the agenda, annual audit report.
Hello, my name is Ryan Ritchie. I've actually done the audit here now for 7 years, so I'm pretty familiar with your report. I know you just got a copy of it now, and you probably haven't had a chance to really go through it, so if in the future when you're reading through it, if you have questions, feel free to get in touch. I'd be happy to answer any question that you have. I'm not going to go through the whole thing today in the interest of time. I'm just going to kind of highlight some things that I thought were important. And if need be, if you find something in there as you're glancing through and you want to discuss that further, that's certainly, we can arrange that. If you go to page 1, the opinion. Yep, page 1. Bottom paragraph is our opinion. We gave you what's in auditing, it's called an unqualified opinion, and it's the highest opinion we can give on your set of statements. Since I've been here, that's with the same opinion you received for the last 7 years. Those aren't routine opinions. There's a lot of work that goes into, we don't just give those away, so there's a lot of work the district does to get that, so it's a good thing. Basically what we're saying is what you have in front of you represents fairly in all material respects the financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information for the Port Edward School District. So what you have in front of you is what we're saying is a fair representation. You skip ahead to page 4. We're just going to start there. That's your government-wide statement of net position. What I just want to highlight there is if you look in the buildings line, it went from $5,572,000 up from about just over $5 million last year. Those are all the building remodels and renovations that have been going on. That's where those get accounted for. Total assets as of June 30th are just over $4 million, which is an increase of about $233,000 from last year. Any questions on that? If you have questions at any point, feel free just to shout them out. If we go to page 6. Page 6 is the balance sheet for the governmental funds. This is kind of the meat and potatoes and what everybody looks at. What the balance sheet is it's a snapshot of where the district is as of June 30th, 2017. So it'll show the assets, all the liabilities, and basically what you can spend at that point in time. So at June 30th, you had total assets within your funds of $1.8 million, which is a decrease of about $165,000 from last year. Total cash was $1,095,151, which is a decrease of $116,000 from last year. Those decreases coincide with the building projects. Page 7 is just the reconciliation back to the statement, the government-wide statement of net position. We're going to skip that and go to page 8. What page 8 is basically, you can think of it as your income statement. It lists your revenues, expenses, and then other financing sources. Total revenue increased about $375,000 from last year. Majority of that increase came from the interdistrict source, which was kind of just talked about, was the open enrollment and it increased about $254,000 from last year. Total expenses in the support services increased about $262,000. Operations and maintenance of plant was the majority of the increase at $232,000. Basically, that would be most of your building renovations again. Total revenues over expenses in the general fund were $189,000 deficit. And total for the whole school district was a deficit of $191,000. Any questions on that? We're going to go on. I'm going to skip over some of the statements here. Basically, the statements show the trust funds and your student activity funds. I'm going to skip over pages 12 through 35. These are the footnotes to the report. So they detail things on the front of the schedules, kind of explain accounting methods, basically how we arrived at some of the figures up front. I would encourage you to read it because there's a lot of good information in here, but for the sake of time, we're just going to pass over that for now. You should be on roughly page 36. It's a schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. It's your budget to actual. This is basically, when we get the question of how did the district do, this is the statement that tells us this because it compares where your revenues and expenses were relative to your budget. So for total revenues, you were over budget $120,908, which means you took in more revenue than you originally budgeted for. Expenditures and the total instruction was over budget, $50,758. Total support services was over budget, $143,000, with $131,000 of that coming from the operation and maintenance of plant. For the total net change against the budget was only off about $15,000. So at the end of the day, you were pretty close to what you had projected. You had some increases in there with your open enrollment, and I believe, and Lisa, you might know this, but with the building renovations, because of that, overspent a little bit too. But at the end of the day, you're pretty close to what you had projected back in November of 2016.
And the other piece of that, last year we did do some mid-year hiring that was unplanned, and
Right.
yeah.
So overall, pretty close to what you had. General fund was budgeted for a reduction for a spend down of originally $175,000, which is roughly 10% of the unassigned general fund balance. Page 37 will show you just the special ed. It's a required schedule for your report. Nothing really material on here to note. Total transfers were off $5,600. That's pretty close to what you had projected. So nothing real of substance here. Page 38 through page 54 includes your single audit schedules, your OPEB schedules, a couple more reports that we issue over the compliance things of your grants and things like that. I'm going to skip over those. We're going to talk about the findings real briefly. If we start on page 55. We're showing 4 findings this year for the district. They're the same 4 I think we've had now for a number of years, and it's basically because you have limited staff in your finance department. We show 4. It's really, you can think of it as 2 because we show 2 that relate to the financial statements and 2 for the single audit, but they're both related. The first one is segregation of duties. Like I said, you have more or less one person responsible for the majority of the accounting and finance operations of the district. And then the other finding that we show is because we prepare the annual report. That's considered a significant deficiency. So nothing changed from last year. The one thing I generally recommend is that at some point have the business office sit down and kind of just go over their procedures, see if there's ways that they can mitigate internal control. Do it. I always say do it around audit time because that's usually a good reminder. And then sign off, document that you've looked at it, and keep it in your file. So we're going to go on. That's the financial report. We're going to go on to the management letter. Are there any questions on the financial report before we go on? Management letter is should be the stapled portion. Let's see. Go to page 6 of that, please. Page 6 basically just shows the fund balance comparison by fund in a different format. Just shows it side to side. It shows that the general fund unassigned fund balance was about $1.7 million. That's what the district could spend down. That's a decrease of the $192,000 that we just talked about from last year. The other funds didn't really change a whole lot. We expect those to be fairly consistent, and they were. Total governmental funds are about $1.7 million. The chart just below that shows where your fund balance, the trend of your fund balance over the last 5 years. And you can see with a smaller district, you generally have less of a fund balance, which means you see a bigger swing percentage-wise and then dollar value-wise too, because 1 year can significantly influence that. 2016 and 2017 are both trending down. There were some increases, decreases with the smaller district. That's pretty common. The reason we have this in here is if you read the paragraph below, what we generally recommend as a good indicator of where your fund balance is it should be about 20 to 25% of the operating expenditures. And the reason is you don't get the full amount of aid to start the year. You kind of have to ride it down until around December, give or take, when you get your equalized aid, and then you don't get your taxes until August, and then January and February. So have to ride your fund balance down at the early part of the year, and then you get your big increase. If your fund balance dips too low, you end up having to short-term borrow. And with the costs that are associated with the short-term borrowing, it's very difficult to get out of that once you start. So what we generally recommend is about 20 to 25%. That's not a hard and fast number. I've seen districts below that and they don't short-term borrow, they do just fine. I've seen districts in that range where they have to. So it all depends on your cash management and what expenses you have coming. If you turn the page, go to page 7, you'll see it in a line graph. It kind of just shows where you are as a percentage, and you can see the 20 to 25 is kind of the magic limit where we tend to see districts having to look at short-term borrowing. Right now, you're at about 26, about 27%. With the spend downs, with the budgeted spend downs, though, just pay attention to that. There's nothing wrong with it. Just be aware that as soon as you get to the 20-25% range, that becomes something the district could potentially have to look at. Now, you guys have an unassigned fund balance policy which says 10% has to remain. That's probably in an attempt at some point, someone looked at that to figure out that's probably the minimum you can do before you'd have to short-term borrow. So that's why that's in there. Right now, like I said, you're at 27%, so no real concerns there. If you turn the page, these are just the management comments. Cash reconciliations, we just noted that it wasn't fully reconciled throughout the year. There are ins and outs. We're working with Lisa on this. The reason is, and I'm seeing this at a lot of districts, everything's becoming more automated now. ACH payments, wires in, wires out, everything is happening in an instant. And the timing and the cutoff of that is sometimes challenging to reconcile because a lot of the templates that are set up with the district are with the older systems with checks and receipts, and it was easy to track. Now everything's coming in at once. As soon as you get into online things with credit cards and things like that, they're harder to track. So we're working. I would expect this to be gone next year. The second one on here is the budget process. It's kind of an anomaly this year. With what was on file with DPI, didn't agree back to the record to the district's records. I think it was off around $40 in the property tax. This can happen with a smaller finance office. Just put a step in there as soon as you hit submit to DPI and make sure it agrees to your records. It'll just create a problem on the annual report because they look to match that up. The rest of this is the rep letter. There's not too much in there. Overall, I think the district had a pretty good year, pretty close to what you had projected as your budget. If you guys have any questions for me?
You said that the repeat the statement that you made about it being off how much? $40?
The budget process, the property taxes didn't agree. I think it was around $40.
Just an entry, yeah.
It just didn't agree.
One entry that was skewed.
Yeah. What DPI looks for in the annual report is they match those numbers to the penny.
Okay.
And that was just created in there.
Okay.
So, total levy was fine. It was just an allocation between the funds.
All right.
Any other questions? And I understand you just got the report, so like I said, when you go home, if you take a look at it, if you have any questions, just let me know and I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, move on to questions and comments from people in attendance. Anyone wishes to make a comment?
John did not check yes,
Oh,
he checked
okay.
no, so.
Okay.
But,
Glad to have you here, John.
thank you.
All right, we'll move on to consent agenda. Consider approval of minutes of the past meeting, December 13th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Leo, seconded by Kathy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Consider approval on financial reports. Are there any gifts?
I just want to note too that there were 3 budget revisions made in November, and they were just for the donations that we received that are reported last month for those donations. So those revisions were made. And then we also do have a gift. We received 2 indoor scoreboards from Stockbridge High School that were picked up just this last week that will be used in our small gym. So that's what the thank you is floating around.
Yep, they did some remodeling and put in some different scoreboards, so there was an opportunity for free, receive 2
For free?
scoreboards, so.
All right.
Yeah.
With that gift, seek approval of financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Unfinished business. Number 8, second reading of policies as previously presented and contained in the following sections.
So, we went through bylaws, administration, program, professional staff, support staff, students, finances, property, operations, and relations. I could not tell you off the top of my head how many exact policies that contained, but we spent hours reviewing those at previous meetings. Any corrections that we've made, whether it be clerical corrections or substantive, and we didn't really make a lot, we've made. So any other, I've got the policy book open, so if you have any other questions, I can look up the policy and try to give you the answer. So, after you've spent multiple board meetings, okay?
Nobody say anything. For goodness sake.
Well, and just maybe for John's benefit, we spent hours, and this is basically a complete review and revision of our policy book with some assistance from a policy service that specializes in policies for Wisconsin school districts in part. So it was.
Any idea how long it's been since we did this?
Oh, it's since the early 2000s was the last made. I don't want to say it was 2002 is the last time all of the policies looked like they
We're not
had
going to
been.
get to that point again.
No, because this will now, the way we've got it set up now, we will, Neola and the policy service will keep us moving forward with those. So, and we're basically replacing about 150 policies with several hundred policies. But it really, it covers some areas we were very deficient in.
Now, moving forward, as laws change, as current
Yep.
thinking in the field progresses one way or the other, then Neola will update us.
Yes.
So that it should not be necessary for this opus to be repeated.
Not in
Please?
that, and not in that large form. Yeah, yes, Neola, they do provide updates. There will be some policies. Now that you've gone through this, as the state budget process was completed, as the rules of that budget are now being written, and some other pieces, we will now start to see some Neola updates on policy that we will have to come back to, of things you will put into place and act on. We will now have some that we will have to update, and one of those being part-time open enrollment. Used to be a policy we had several years ago. They changed the law. We got rid of the policy. Now we have to bring back the policy.
Right.
So we will be doing some updates,
That'll
but they are
simply
provided.
reflect What's
Yep.
coming and not the entire.
Not the entire thing. They are very on top of, as the laws change,
Thank
as we need
God.
to change policies, keeping us on top of that as well. So,
Okay.
so yep. And then, is that resolution within their materials?
I didn't, I was just looking
The
for it.
resolution,
The
where?
replacement resolution?
Number 9.
Oh.
Well, I have it. Hold on. Give me a moment.
I was just looking to see if I'd read it, and I,
Yep, it is,
Actually, I think I
On
did.
school funding?
no,
That's
no.
what I think when we were.
On number
talking resolution,
9.
I think what happened is.
Yep,
I think I read it somewhere, but
yep, I had sent it out. Just give me a moment.
I can't find it now. We gotta do number 8 first, right?
Or
Yep,
8,
yeah.
So-
well, 9 you have to do, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Number 8,
Second
or
reading.
any other questions on the policies? So we can approve them as a second reading, right? All of them in block? So
Somebody quick make the motion.
seek a motion to approve second reading of all the policies.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Tracy, second by Kathy. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried.
And let me give you the resolution that would be the replacement resolution. Just give me a moment. I'm pulling it up right now. I thought I sent this in. Maybe I didn't. So this would read, and I can read it off to you. Resolve that the bylaws and policies printed and codified in the comprehensive document entitled Bylaws and Policies of the Port Edwards School District Board of Education are hereby adopted, and that all bylaws and policies heretofore adopted by the Port Edwards School District Board of Education are hereby rescinded. Further be it resolved that in the event any policy, part of a policy, or section of the bylaws is judged to be inconsistent with the law, inoperative by court of competent jurisdiction, or invalidated by a policy or contract duly adopted by this board, the remaining bylaws, policies, and parts of policies shall remain in full effect. Take notice that the foregoing resolution was adopted by the Port Edwards School District Board of Education at a meeting held at Port Edwards, Wisconsin on January 2008. And I'm going to just amend that briefly. It should 2018, but it should be. Do you have the version that I had sent you? That let's read that. Let's read that briefly though, because this is going to have an effective date of. So it's resolved that as of February 5, 2018. So you're giving us about just less than a month, and then they will go into effect. And the reason we put a bit of a leg in there is to allow us to get everything updated on the school website and in published form. So we have a little bit of a lag, and so we just pick an effective date that's out a little bit. So and you should have that now in front of you if you got your email.
Yep.
So.
Should I have Carol print it?
Yeah. If possible. Kara, could you, if we send that to you, can you print it?
I'll email you and
It is.
this copy.
Yep, I got it.
Or- Oh, okay.
Yeah, is that okay? Can you?
She shut
I've
down.
got it.
I can go get it.
And that way then print it so we get all those
I'm
signatures.
trying to get.
Yeah,
it.
we just need a signature copy at the end.
Need it in on your note.
Okay,
Yep.
I didn't know if you needed it like.
Yep, but if you're
2
able to
seconds,
read it, any,
We see a typo John's name.
yep, we're
Oh,
we're changing it. We're changing the typo on the.
And your name was wrong too.
Yes, it
How many
is.
you want me to print?
We just need one for their
A
signature.
signature copy.
Yep. Take the, give
I already
give John
did.
an end and
I already
delete
did.
one of my
I already
A's.
fixed it.
Weingarten,
Yeah.
Thomas Garten.
Yeah,
It's
I
always
know.
confusing.
Well, that was the way it originally was. My grandfather got lazy. I don't know what happened. Probably Ellis Island.
So as you can see, that it's the resolution gives us about a month. It is, in colloquial terms, repeal and replace. So you're repealing as of February 5, all of the old policy goes out of effect, all of the new policy goes
As long as
into
we're not
effect.
repealing what we just voted on.
Yeah, no, you're not.
Yes, yes.
No. So,
So I'll seek a motion for that. Yeah.
So move.
Got a motion and a second to approve the district policy adoption resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. On to new business. Number 10, consider approval of open enrollment spaces for special education and regular education programs for the 2018-19 school year.
so the chart that you have on open enrollment, we have to, by law, the school board has to take action. The school board has a few choices in the action it takes. It could choose to set no limit, but you have to resolve to do that. You have to set that as an action. However, the other piece is the school board can vote to limit open enrollment spaces. One of the problems that we are faced with open enrollment is we have had a really positive run on open enrollment. It has been good for our growth of our student body and within the district in that sense. Where it his hitting us is a bit in the pocketbook side, being as once we surpass equal in and out and go more coming in, our funding is more of a 2/3 model at that point. And as you have to then look at hiring staff to staff bigger classrooms or staff more students, we're not receiving the full dollar value that we would receive on a resident student. And it really becomes the residents of the district are, in a sense, then making it up. And so we have to be, to be fiscally responsible and look at this, where are we going to place limits and what are we going to do? So in the recommendation in front of you, the 4-year-old kindergarten piece, at this point we have maintained for several years, many years, just we're going to leave that as no limit. There's a couple of reasons why. One is sometimes we have 4-year-old kindergarten students that we know are only going to be here for 4-year-old kindergarten. They're with us 1 year and then they're back to their resident district. And that sometimes has to deal with the wraparound childcare and those pieces in place. So I don't really see any reason why we changed the model of that at this point. And the same could be said. We have students who come to us in kindergarten who did 4-year-old kindergarten in another district just due to childcare and those other wraparound pieces. So there's no reason to do that. A year ago, you put in place a class size policy, and that policy is our guideline. It's not steadfast, set in stone. So if our policy says, we have a class size limit in the 6th grade of 30 students, 31 isn't going to suddenly put in effect. We have to hire a teacher. It's not that steadfast, but it is more of that guideline. What is the recommended? So as you look at this, our kindergarten next year, right now, we're projecting 1 section of kindergarten. The absolute cap on that kindergarten is, with 1 section, is 24 students. We're projecting 15 moving forward. That is a difference of 9. I used, in setting this up, I used a model of reserving the majority of the space, so that's 9 students, to hit that guideline number where we would be looking at hiring. But we reserve the majority of that space for resident students. However, we do allow some open enrollment. And I used a model to be consistent of 70-30. 70% reserved in resident space, 30% reserved for open enrollment growth. We are sitting today at about 28% open enrollment. So that 70-30 model is pretty consistent with what our current status is. The other piece of this is we have to defend this. So we have to be able to go back to the state. If we get challenged on this and say we weren't being arbitrary with how we set this up, meaning we can't say in one grade level we're going to use 70-30, and the next grade level it's going to be 60-40, and the next grade level, it's got to be consistent throughout. But we can say we're not taking any. It's at a point we're not taking any. We can also say, yep, in this grade level we are going to take some. But as you look here,
Got a question.
yeah,
So for that example, 15 and 24, kindergarten. If we have 9
Yep.
residents,
or 9 spaces.
if those 9 spaces are for resident
Well,
students,
well,
what happens
if we did a
get 2?
if we did a 70-30 model, there's
What-
9 total spaces. 2 can go to open enrollment, 7 remain
What
as
if-
resident spaces.
What if we get 9 residents and 2 open enrollment?
You take them. You have
You
to
take
take them.
Yeah.
It allows it allows residents to be the majority of the growth, but if we say we're taking 2, we're taking 2.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
You said the DPI can challenge our
Well-
decision in terms of the consistency of the formula.
You need to be able to show you're not being arbitrary.
So if just do a
Yeah.
hypothetical here, at some point in this process, at some grade level where we've set a limitation, and that number for open enrollment is met,
Yep. You might have to do a denial.
Then we deny the student
Open enrollment.
open enrollment.
Yep.
And then can that parent challenge this? Or
Yes.
can only the DPI
No,
challenge?
the parent can go and basically challenge how we set this up then. But because we have a class size policy in place, and because we would use a consistent model in setting this, that's what we're trying to just be consistent.
Right.
Yep.
But by doing that, you pretty much cut off at the knees.
You try to protect yourself in doing that. Yep.
A potential challenge
Yep.
that would upset the apple cart.
Yep.
Okay.
We did, just so that you know, during the regular open enrollment period that starts in February and ends in late April, we didn't deny any students during that period this past year with the limits you set last year. We did not deny a single student. Now, once that deadline passes at the end of April, there's no open enrollment until July. And then in July, people can go through basically an alternative method of open enrollment, or this exception method. The space limitation remains. It doesn't change the space limitation. We did have to do a denial this year based on the late people to that open enrollment process, July and later. And to be honest, when we're setting up how our class structures are going to be and what our enrollment is and how our schedules are going to be, if we were suddenly, the problem we got caught in 2 years ago was we were suddenly having all these people showing up in August saying they wanted to open enroll. That can completely upset the apple cart in terms of how we schedule and set that in motion. Now, residents could upset that apple cart too. If we have people moving in, but there are residents at that point, and that's, then we deal with that. So the only area, so as you look at the class size recommendations, you will see the only area I put a question mark in, and I only left it there this as more of a discussion point. Fiscally, it probably does not make sense for us to take, at the moment, 6th grade open enrollment. So I would recommend setting that as 0, because taking open enrollment puts us in a position where we may have to hire a teacher. Well, and if we're hiring a teacher and bringing in 3 or 4 students, we don't have that full funding, and so fiscally, it does not make the fiscal sense there for our taxpayers. It does not make fiscal sense to do that. If you look at the high school numbers, I am going to project we are going to split the high school 9th grade. We're at that point, we need to split that group for next year. So we would bring in open enrollment into high school 9th grade. And as you can see, 10th and 11th, though, no room for open enrollment at the moment. And we're at that point in those 2 grades at the moment for next year. The senior class, there would be room for a couple of open enrollments. That sometimes has been problematic for us in the past, but again, to be consistent with that model of 70-30 across the board, that stays consistent there. It would allow a couple at the senior level. So last year, our high school 9th, 10th, and 11th we really virtually had no open enrollment, very little open enrollment in the high school last year. This would give us a little bit again in the 9th grade year. And typically we don't get 8 in one class, but it allows that. Special education open enrollment, we work with our special education directors through CISA to set those levels. They're based on caseloads that we have, based on total open enrollments. If there is not a space available in the regular education population, for instance, if we have no spaces available in 6th grade, but it was a 6th grade special education student, that regular trumps that, meaning there are no spaces available. Even if we have a special education space available in the middle school, if they're going to come in as a 6th grader, they're not, because overall we have no space available in 6th grade. But there is a little bit of growth here in this formula as presented to us by our special education staff this year. So last year, I believe it was 2 total students, K-12 in special education. This year, as you can see, a little more robust with 5 potential open enrollments, K-12. So, I would recommend that sixth grade number be 0, and that you would pass this as presented. It does allow, other than sixth grade, 10th and 11th grade, it allows some open enrollment at every level. We are projecting 1 kindergarten section for next year. So, keeping sanity in kindergarten. The kindergarten number is the next number that's got a small number, and along with that first grade, as you can see. But again, we bring in 3 first graders, we're tapping the door to 40 kids suddenly in first grade. So,
How much of a historical correlation is there between the enrollment projections for kindergarten vis-a-vis 4K? If we happen to have a small 4K group like we do this year, does it almost always follow that you end up with a small kindergarten, or can there suddenly be...
There can be some influx. This year, our
surprise.
kindergarten's grown this year from where it was last year.
Okay.
We were sitting, I believe it was at 26 at one point, and so we're sitting at 35. So yeah, we've
Okay.
grown.
All right.
So
So in theory, by next September, there could be more than 15 kindergartens.
then and that won't change the open enrollment because you said it
Right,
tonight, but it
right.
might change what we have to do for
Right.
staffing.
I mean,
Yep.
the district residential students obviously trump
Yes.
anything else. Those people have to be served, and
Yep.
if it creates an issue, we'll just have to
Yep.
deal with it.
Yep. And just keep that in mind when you set this number.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we get all 9, if our number goes to 9 and they haven't been open enrolled, but suddenly we get 2 more open enrolled kids, we're bringing those open enrolled kids along. So, and you're setting that as a number tonight. So, the other thing this does, it shuts off all open enrollment exceptions and alternative applications as of tonight for the remainder of the year. So we will not bring in any more open enrolled students for the remainder of this year under that exception. And it very much is because that could throw off our numbers. And the state basically says, nope, you get to have what you get at this point. And you don't have to worry about 10 students suddenly in February walking through your door all open enrolled and having it really mess these numbers up. So they can apply through the regular process for the following year. So.
All right. Seek approval of the open enrollment spaces for special ed and regular education programs.
So move.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Next new business is discussion and consideration of resolution on school funding.
There is a Blue Ribbon Commission that has been established in the state legislature to deal with school funding and to talk about that issue. It consists of representatives and senators along with some public school officials, some private school officials, and other interested parties across the state. This resolution, if you so choose to pass it, would ask that commission to really look at the situation for schools like Port Edwards, where we have this disparity of we're educating 426 students, but we're only really truly receiving revenue limit funding of 380 students. It would ask to start to find ways to address that. There is no mechanism currently in the financial system for public school funding that addresses rapidly increasing enrollment. There are mechanisms that address declining enrollment and allow schools to continue to retain funds even though they've lost the students. It's only a 1-year system, so the school each and every year it might look different, but it slows their decline down on the revenue side. Well, here we sit with 66 more students sitting in our seats than we had just a couple of years ago, actually sitting in our seats. I want to say we're approaching the 18% mark. That's approaching, if you're a bigger school district that happens to be to our north, That approaches almost 1,000, what did we figure out, Ms. Christie? About 1,000 students. Can you imagine
What they would do.
what that district would have to go through at and our problem certainly isn't 1,000 students,
Right.
but we still have the same problems.
Percentage-wise.
We're going to be, this year, we will have to have some serious discussions at staffing about food service, maintenance, and some of those areas that we had taken those, we had drawn down teaching staff, we'd drawn down staff with our paraprofessional aides, we'd drawn down our food service staff, our maintenance staff. Well, our number is now, the number of kids we have sitting in our seats is now greater than 6 years ago. And so we need to probably, we had drawn those numbers down as we were shuttering classrooms in the middle school wing of the building. Those classrooms are now back in service. And, we are now serving more kids in the food service program. And we were sitting less than 200 students in the middle school, high school building, and now we're approaching 250 students. And the same is said for here at the elementary, as we've grown these classes here in this building. So there are some serious equity pieces in place. So I think this commission really has its work cut out for it. And you've had an opportunity certainly to look at this resolution. It really addresses some of our problems, but also talks about some of the pieces like a voucher funding. A voucher student is worth just over $8,000. Our taxpayers pay for that directly at the moment because we can exempt that from the revenue limit, but we also lose that amount in aid. So we're taxing, so we're paying, we have a loss in aid for a student on a voucher. Well, our taxpayers are then being taxed for that. So, and those vouchers are worth more than the aid transfer for open enrollment. So,
I think the greatest overall issue here is that I think the general public, the parents, the taxpayers, the citizens of the state as a whole, assume that when a student comes to a school system, they receive there's a pot of money that follows that student. That's simply not true. There's all these variances. There's all these differences. We get $10,800 for approximately for a resident student. If we receive a open enrollment student, we get about 2/3 of that.
yeah.
So there's $3,000 plus. Where does it go?
And that's what people don't understand.
That money is going somewhere.
Well,
And we
yeah.
It's not coming to us.
Yeah.
The public needs to understand, and the laws need to change so that what happens to school funding is completely transparent. The last two lines of the resolution, to create transparency within the system so that school district residents and property taxpayers easily understand how public schools are funded, to create transparency within the system so that school district residents and property taxpayers understand local school district costs for financing vouchers and how these costs affect their property tax bills. It's not free money. You're paying for it. And people don't get that, and they need to get that.
So-
I'll move for adoption of this resolution.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is carried.
And I would like to suggest, Kyle, that we not send this just to Mr. Teston and Mr. Krug, but that we send it to Joint Finance, we send it to the Senate and Assembly Education Committees, and we send it to the people who are in Joint Finance.
Yeah, and
the
it
commission.
really is calling on.
And the commission.
And calling on all of those,
Exactly.
all of those people.
Exactly.
The resolution calls on all of those people
Yes.
to take some action on on school finance.
I think we should also share this resolution with the state association, the School Boards Association, and with Wisconsin Public Education Network. Because they're trying to round up the districts that are speaking up and taking action like this as a concerted attempt to make a change. So,
All right. Next item is consider approval of Wisconsin School Nutrition Purchasing Cooperative 2018-19 agreement.
If this is for our food service program, we enter into a cooperative with many other districts to just basically have that joint power of purchase, that cooperative purchasing power, so that we can get better rates on when working with the vendors. So,
And there's a lot of school districts involved, right?
yes, there are. Yep.
Yeah.
And we've been involved with this cooperative for the past several years. It changed this past year. It was a cooperative through CISA. It's now just its own cooperative. So, but we've been involved with these groups, with this particular group of schools for quite some time now.
All right. Seek approval of the school nutrition agreement.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Next item, opportunity of individual board member comment. Kathy?
I just want to, I guess, tell how wonderful the holiday meal was before the holiday break that Mrs. Bruner and the Ecology Club put on in the Alexander Auditorium. It was beautiful, and the meal was delicious, and I just thought it was absolutely awesome.
We'll pass that on. So.
All right. Leo?
I'd like to call the board's attention and the public's attention to a program that's going to take place on Sunday, the 28th of January at the United Methodist Church here in Port Edwards. Local historian and author Marshall Beeler will be presenting part 2 of his program on the history of Port Edwards and Wisconsin Rapids. There will be posters of this sort around the schools and around the community. It's open to the public. If members of the community wish to attend, they would like them to either email or contact the church so they can make sure they have appropriate refreshments for the folks. 11:30 for the lunch and 12 o'clock for the program. Lasts about 45 minutes. Marshall will take questions afterwards. He was there a couple of years ago, and we had about 100 people that attended. Marshall is a retired executive from Nakusa Papers and is a lifetime district resident. He's forgotten more about this community than most of us ever know, and he's a real asset for those who are interested in learning about the history of the community that we represent. So I would encourage anyone with a local connection or a history connection to come and enjoy Marshall's company for an afternoon. The Packers aren't playing, so we have we don't have to worry about football conflicts. John, you have a question?
Is anybody taping that? Did you
We're
tape the first?
well, Phil Brown and the Southwood County Historical Society attempted to tape Marshall's program before, and there was a malfunction, and it didn't come through. So I have been in touch with Phil, and we're trying to get appropriate equipment in place. I thought perhaps maybe the school district or River Cities or somebody would also be interested. We are pursuing that because, Marshall's no spring chicken anymore.
90.
He's 90 years old, and we have to strike while the iron is hot and the heart is beating. So, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Tracy?
I just want to say more about like the school funding thing and how with all of our open enrollments we kind of get stuck in a really tough spot in providing people the school that they are trying to get their children into. And I like knowing that we're not kind of going to stop until we get that straightened out, where we can continue to provide this school as the one that people are trying to get their kids into. Because I believe Port Edwards has a lot to offer, and that's exactly why people are open enrolling this way. So if we can get that fixed, I think people will definitely reap the benefits of this amazing school system that Port Edwards offers.
Very good. And I just have one item. I just wanted to let everyone know I have filed to run again for a seat on the school board. I've enjoyed my time thus far, and I was first elected in 2006, and so this April will be my 12th year on the board. So I look forward to serving if that's voters' will. So,
Good.
with that, I will go on to establish future board meetings. Wednesday, February 14th is our next meeting.
Like I said, I will not be in
Leo will be
attendance.
gone.
I will be gone that night, so.
And I guess we can do in April. What would be April?
March.
March.
March. Oh,
March
yeah.
14th.
March 14th?
Same thing, March 14th.
Okay. Very good. All right. Call for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.